The last framework on the list is the integrative framework or integrative theory. And in this framework, unlike the other ones that requires the counselor to make use of a single approach based on the theory selected, integrative theory or integrative counseling or therapy does not restrict the counselor to a particular methodology or school of thought. Instead, counselors can draw on different techniques as they are needed. The goal of this is to improve the efficacy and efficiency of the treatment and adapt it to the specific needs of the individuals. Which means that the counselor is not expected to focus on, okay, let me just use humanistic theory to assess this person. Okay, let me just use behavioral to assess this person. If there is a need for the counselor to merge one or two together, they'll be able to draw techniques from the various therapies or various theories and merge them together and prepare a treatment plan for the clients. Example of this includes cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very common and popular therapy. As from the name, cognitive behavioral therapy, you must have known that it was drawn from the cognitive theory and then the behavioral theory. Cognitive theory only focuses on modifying our thoughts, how we think, changing our thoughts and how they affect our behavior. And behavioral theory only focus on how our behavior and learning pattern affect our behavior. So instead of focusing on those, either of these two only, the cognitive behavioral therapy comes together and focus on how the thoughts can be changed in order to modify the behavior. It works on the thoughts and also works on modifying the behavior by merging techniques from cognitive theory and behavioral theory together. Some of the common techniques used under CBT is cognitive restructuring. Because it all starts from the mind. It all starts from the thought before it gets to the behavior. If they are able to restructure how a person thinks, the thought process, and if they are able to do this successfully, they'll be able to modify the person's behavior and achieve the desired thing that they want to achieve. Another therapy under this integrative theory is psychodynamic therapy, which incorporates psychoanalytic techniques to help people understand some of their unconscious forces and motivations that affect their behavior and current functioning. This psychodynamic theory is an extension of psychoanalysis theory by Sigmund Freud. While psychoanalysis refers to the original framework by Sigmund Freud, psychodynamic approach broadens it by incorporating contributions from later theorists like Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, and Erik Erikson. For example, Sigmund Freud came up with psychosexual stages, which is the time frame is from birth to puberty stage, and it has 5 stages. And then Erik Erikson came with psychosocial stages, which is from birth to old age, like 65 years old or till death. And this theory is in 8 stages, unlike psychosexual stages that was in 5 stages. So you can see that this is an extension of what Sigmund Freud propounded as psychosexual stages. This approach, which is the integrative approach, suggests that there is no single method that is superior for each situation. It also shows that even discordant theories can work together to benefit people with mental health conditions. So this will be the end of this OER, but before we call it an end, it is necessary that we go back and make a quick recap of what we've been talking about so far. And the first one is the definition of counseling, which was defined according to the American Psychological Association as a professional assistance in coping with personal problems, including emotional, behavioral, vocational, marital, educational, rehabilitation, and life stage problems. Then, I added a definition that, from my point of view, counseling can be defined as a situation by which a counselor looks the part of a client that they may never knew existed, or they may never recognize it, but they need it to solve a problem. Because at the end of the day, the counselor cannot single-handedly solve the problem of the clients. They have to wake a part of the clients that will be able to collaborate with them to solve this problem. Then we made mention of the principles of counseling, which is one of the reasons why it is differentiated from guidance. We have principles like principle of universality, principle of confidentiality, and principle of individual differences, among the others. Then we have a hierarchical representation of counseling process, where we put the process of counseling in a hierarchical format that helps us to understand what comes first and what comes last, which on the top we have counseling theories, then we have therapy, we have counseling techniques, and finally we have skills. We use analogy, we use a map analogy where on the map is the theory itself, the routes or the roads on the map is the therapy, the techniques is the means of transportation that you want to use in navigating this road, and finally the skills is the ability to use the means of transportation. Can you drive? If you can drive, then you'll be able to use the means of transportation. That means, do you have this skill? Then if you have this skill, you can be able to use these counseling techniques on the road, which is the therapy provided by the map, which is the theory. Then we moved on to explaining the various counseling theories. We started with psychoanalytic theory, which was developed by Sigmund Freud, an Austrian physiologist, which plenty works in psychological field, made him a notable figure in psychological field. We use some of his works like structure of personality by using id, ego, and superego. We explain psychosocial stages, and we made mention of defense mechanism. Then under this we have techniques like dream interpretation and free association. Then we moved on to the behavioral theory, which maintains that people's behavior is in reaction to their environment, how the environment shape our behavior, how the things we are exposed to, how they affect our behavior, and so on. And this has three areas of development, which is the classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov, whereby a stimulus is placed before a response. You use a stimulus to elicit a response from an organism. Then we have the operant conditioning that explains how reinforcement of behavior can make the behavior happen again, or punishing the behavior can make it stop happening. I use an example of promising kids that if you do well in school, I'll buy you gifts. So then we moved on to social learning approach, whereby people learn by observing what is happening around them, what the people around them are doing, and turning this into their day-to-day behavior. Then we moved on to cognitive theory, which theorized that an individual's thoughts, feelings, and behavior are all connected, and that human behaviors is strongly influenced by how we think. Under this, we have the rational emotive behavioral therapy, which is the ABCDE techniques. Then we moved on to humanistic school of thought, which focused on self-belief and the free will and willingness of the human being to become a better version of themselves, regardless of their environment, regardless of their past, regardless of their thoughts. And under it, we mentioned Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we mentioned class center therapy, and we mentioned Gestalt therapy. Finally, we landed at the bus stop of integrative theory or integrative framework, which implies that you don't need to stick to a particular school of thought to find a solution to your client's problem. If you can draw techniques from different theories or different schools of thought, merge it together, and prepare a treatment plan that will improve the efficacy and efficiency of the treatment plan, why not go ahead? And under it, we have cognitive behavioral therapy, and we also have psychodynamic therapy. That is the end of this. Oh yeah. Thank you.